Welcome to Greek for a Week. I'm glad that you have decided to view this week's video. And as you can tell, this week we are going to be diagramming chapter 4, verses 1 through 9 of the book of Philippians. And again, we've been working through this for the past couple of weeks, and I've titled this particular paragraph Paul's Final Admonitions. So as we look at the Greek text for this entire paragraph, I really don't want to make too many notes. I think I'm going to cover everything here in the next couple of slides. But do note that there are several commands, there are several, again, admonitions of Paul that we will see throughout the paragraph, which I think will help us in the end to know how to preach or teach this particular paragraph. I think some things are laid out quite nicely for us just to see how to move forward. So let's do that. Let's just see how, again, the purpose of these diagrams is to try to show the relationships. I don't want to just communicate verse 1, verse 2, verse 3, but rather I want to show the relationships between these verses and between the various phrases and words within these verses. Grammar and syntax is basically what we're working through here. So as we jump into the text here, you have a therefore, a hoste, which I'm suggesting is drawing consequences from the previous information, which would be chapter 3, namely verses 19 and 20 and so forth. He says, therefore, my brethren, and then now he begins to define or further clarify the brethren. He does it first by saying that they are beloved ones and they are longed for ones. And those are nominatives of apposition. He continues and also calls them his joy and his crown. These also are nominative of apposition. Then he refers again back to verse 20 and he says, in this way. So we could say here, in this way, what am I asking you to do? Well, I'm asking you to stand, have a firm commitment or a firm commitment. Then he says, in the Lord. Now, again, there are several phrases that he uses in the Lord. You can say that it's locative in the sense that you're standing firmly committed in your relationship with the Lord. Or I think there's a potential of another option that would be stand because of your relationship in the Lord. I don't think those two are easily separated, but I think that's the communication he's making. Hey, there's a relationship here. I want you to stand committed. And then once again, he calls them beloved ones. I think kind of like an inclusio here for verse 1. So as we move forward, he has verse 2 here. I urge Euodia and Syntyche. And what is it that I'm urging them to do? And that is to be of the same mind. Again, he has in the Lord here, just like he does up here in verse 1. He also has it in verse 2. Then he says, yes, I also ask you, true companion, to help. There's another imperative. I want you to help these women. But not only do I want you to help these women, I'm going to further define them. Who, now these women who have labored alongside of me, where? In the gospel, with whom? Clement and the rest of my fellow workers, whose names are in the book of life. So this relative pronoun here goes back to fellow workers, and this goes back to women here. So you can see the progression down this direction here, which again, I'm not saying that's unimportant information, but certainly it's not the main point of the text, especially when you have relative clauses. Then we get to verse 4. Here's another imperative. Rejoice. Here we go again. Rejoice in the Lord. There's that locative concept or relational concept. So we rejoice. And then he says, and again, I will say rejoice. Verse 5, let your gentle spirit be known. So here's another imperative. Be known. Known to all men. The Lord is near. Verse 6, do not worry about anything. So here's another imperative. But the contrast to that is that in everything, he's asking the Philippians, let your requests be made known. So here is another form of gnosko, very similar to up here. And let your requests be made known to God. That's pros, that would be directional to God. Now, the means by which you make those requests known is through prayer and through petition, and then the manner in which you do it is with thanksgiving. Then verse 7, and the peace of God. The of God here, the theou, is a genitive of source, suggesting that the peace is sourced in or comes from God, which surpasses. There's an attributive participle, so it's the peace of God that surpasses all comprehension, and it will guard your hearts and your thoughts in Christ Jesus. The last couple of verses now, verse 8 and 9, he says, finally, brethren, and this is the list that he provides that I know has been probably quoted a number of times. Whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable. He says here, if, okay, first class conditional clause, basically saying there is excellence in these things, and if there's anything worthy of praise. So these two things here, these first class conditions, basically describe all of these comments above here: true, honorable, right, okay, all of these adjectives here. So they're excellent and they're worthy of praise. He says, I want you to think on. So here is another imperative. Think on, and note this, these things. Now, the things which you have learned and you have received and you have heard and you have seen in me. Then he gives us another command. I want you to practice, again, these things. Okay, and here's these things. And the God of peace will be with you. All right, so if we take this paragraph, how might we organize it so that we can communicate it in a preaching or a teaching scenario? First of all, the first command is to stand in the Lord, and that's based on the previous section. For example, chapter 3, verse 20. So stand in the Lord, help the women, Euodia and Syntyche, rejoice in the Lord, let your gentle spirit be known, again, to all men. I think that's important because I don't think he's talking just those within the church community, but to everyone. Don't worry about anything, but what I am asking you to do is make your requests known, okay? Do it through prayer and petition with thanksgiving. Think on the things that are excellent and worthy of praise, and practice the things that Paul has modeled to you. Trust this has been helpful. We've wrapped up quite a paragraph there. That's 9 verses. Obviously, next week we will begin with verse 10 of chapter 4. Have a great week.